hybrid. Quorum is physically present at the Hart Administrative Offices at 1201 East 7th Avenue, Florida Conference Room, and the rest of the board members are participating via communication media technology. So please look at your screens. An image of the flag is displayed. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Staff, please do roll call.
Director Castor? Director Hudson?
Here.
Director Johnson?
Here.
Director Kemp?
Here.
Director Knight?
Present.
Director Overman?
Here.
Chair Schisler?
Here.
Director Williams? You do have a quorum.
Thank you. The rules for participation and the roles and responsibility for every committee are provided in your packet. Our next agenda item is public comment. Is there anyone pre-registered for public comment this morning?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. This concludes the public input section of our meeting. The next item is our election of committee officers. Ms. Julia Mandel, Hart General Counsel, is recognized to lead the joint committee through the affirmation of the 2022 committee officer elections.
Good morning, Board. We had already made decisions on our officers, but because of the timing, we need to go ahead and take a vote. I'm sorry? My mic is on? Maybe here, let me pull my mask down. Sorry, let me go ahead and start over. We had already taken an action as individual committees to choose the the officers for each committee. That being said, because of the timing, we need to go ahead and just take a simple vote of affirmation of all of the officers for each one of the committees. If you want us, I can ask Danielle if she has that information available to read out who each one of the officers are, so we have that for the record. Do you have that information? And then we'll go ahead and just take a vote of affirmation.
Is it appropriate to do individual or just in?
I don't know if this is the case for anybody else, but the audio is so terrible that I can't imagine that it's being picked up by, YouTube or otherwise. So I just wanted to let you know, I could barely hear anything that Ms. Mandel said.
I apologize, and I can try. Is it better now that I speak louder?
Yes, it is. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I will, I'm hearing myself speak so loud, so I just was a little cognizant of that. I apologize. What was the question that was just asked?
Do we need to do this committee by committee, or can you do it in mass?
We could do it as a joint committee, since each committee already took the action. It was just from a timing perspective of assuring that we went ahead and just took a vote to just make sure that everybody was clear on who was on the officers for which committee.
Okay, cool. Danielle, if you could list who the officers are, and then we call for a roll call vote.
Yes, sir. You'll give me just one more moment. I'm so sorry about that.
No worries.
For the Strategic Planning and External Relations Committee, Director Kemp was elected as the committee chair, and Director Johnson was elected as the committee vice chair. For the Operations and Safety Committee, Director Williams was elected as the I apologize. For the Finance and Audit Committee, Director Schisler was elected as the Finance and Audit Committee Chair, and Director Williams was elected as the Finance and Audit Committee Vice Chair. And for the Operations and Safety Committee, Director Williams was nominated as the chair.
Ms. Arthur, if I may?
Yes, ma'am.
I have my notes, and Director Schisler was nominated as vice chair.
That is correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I just need a vote to
Move
affirm
approval.
those nominations. Thank you.
Okay. Danielle, do a roll call vote, please, to affirm.
Did we have a motion?
Do we
Or did
need a
we?
motion?
made a
I don't-
motion, and Director
So a
Williams.
motion, a second. Danielle, if you'll make her do the roll call vote. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir. Commissioner
David
Knight.
Bowers, yes, David Bowers, in, but I'm having a real problem trying to hear, so I'm trying to do the best I can. So some stuff going in and out, as Commissioner Williams was saying. So I'm going to try to follow you as best as I can.
Okay, apologies for that. We'll see if we can clear that up on this end. Thank you, Director Knight.
On the motion, Director Hudson,
Yes.
Director Johnson,
Yes.
Director Kemp,
Yes.
Director Knight,
Yes,
Director Overman,
Yes.
Chair Schisler,
Yes.
Director Williams.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, item number 4, excuse me, approval of previous minutes. In section 4 of the packet, you'll find the minutes from the Strategic Planning and External Relations, Operations and Safety, and the Finance and Audit Committee's hybrid meeting dated January 24th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve all sets of minutes?
So moved.
Second? I didn't hear, I'm sorry, Ms. Williams. Okay, Danielle, roll call vote, please.
Director Hudson,
Yes.
Director Johnson,
Yes.
Director Kemp,
Yes.
Director Knight,
I couldn't hear it.
Yeah, he can't hear. We don't know what we're voting on. We cannot hear you guys.
It's a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meetings.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you.
Yes, for night.
Thank you, Director Overman,
Yes.
Chair Schisler,
Yes.
Director Williams.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, we'll start our presentations. Presentation 5A is the Arterial Bus Rapid Transit Update. Mr. Damian Miller from Benish will present the Arterial Bus Rapid Transit Update. Mr. Scott Pringle from WSP will be virtually attending to assist.
Thank you for your time this morning. Damian Miller from Benish. And I just want to do a quick check. Can the folks online hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Maybe it's a specific microphone there. So this is a presentation on the update of this project. Many of you have seen the opening slides before, but I'm going to go through them anyway for the new members. And then if there are questions, if I go too fast, we can always double back. Oh,
It's red. They didn't switch the game.
okay. All good. So the fundamental purpose of this project was to identify a corridor using some combination of Florida Avenue, Nebraska Avenue, and Fowler to connect downtown Tampa to the USF campus area. And USF is, well, both downtown and USF are obviously not a singular point, and so part of that was figuring out, what the endpoints on either end were and how the service would work with that. That's been a long-standing goal. Every transit study that's been done in the Tampa Bay region identifies that connection as one of the most critical ones for the area, and so it makes sense that would be, where we would be looking for this project. In terms of overall goals, this project was a little bit unique. A lot of times BRT projects just look at getting a bus system from point A to point B, but this one really had a broader scope than that, which I think was fantastic. Part of that was to improve safety and transit operating conditions for multiple, not just the main line route that we were trying to define, but also connectivity for east-west routes that would interface with this and serve as part of the overall ridership network. Improving local transit access for communities beyond the immediate study area, and then also thinking about bicycle and pedestrian access to transit. You can have the fastest, cleanest, nicest, shiniest buses in the world, but if your customers can't safely and conveniently get to them, it's not going to be a great service. And then also fundamentally supporting a rapid bus service that improves and expands transit operations to attract new riders and benefit existing riders. And I think that's very important today as we think about the overall state of the system, the benefit to existing riders as well as attracting new ridership. Originally, this was going to go in two phases. We were going to have a quick opening phase and define the basic alignment, and then from there go gangbusters to the small start process. And some different things happened along the way that chose us to basically gave us cause to take a step back. And so we completed the first phase, which was basically the high-level plan and the alignment. But then we went through and did what we call phase 2A, which was really to take that alignment and develop out the concepts along it further to really get into the weeds about where we would be doing curbside shoulder running busway, where we would have some segments of mixed traffic, mostly due to right-of-way and traffic constraints, and then where we would have a recommended median guideway, which is really that sort of extra high level of service. And then come back and decide, okay, are we going to go ahead and get into the FTA small starts process for the full build alternative, or should we step back and do more incremental projects along the way, which is more or less where we're here today. In terms of collaboration, multiple meetings with a technical committee, also a stakeholder committee with members of the public and non-transportation agency stakeholders, and then coordination with FDOT's Fowler Avenue multimodal study, and then it's not for nothing, significant coordination with FDOT's Heights Mobility Study as well, and I could mention as well coordination with the Tampa Streetcar Extension Modernization Study. The recommended alignment for this project is to use the one-way pairs coming out of downtown. I always start at downtown for some reason, and then proceed north on the Florida Avenue and the Tampa Street one-way pair system, Florida Avenue north, and then cross over on Linebaugh to Nebraska, then Nebraska to Fowler, and then Bruce B. Downs, and with the northern end of line being the University Area Transit Center. That was it's an existing hub that we've already got an investment in, and it also provides really great direct access to the two major hospitals at Brackett, Bruce B. Downs Boulevard, at that location, which are potentially huge ridership generators. As we went through this study, there were different looks at how we segue over from Florida Ave to Nebraska, and ultimately we selected Linebaugh based on a preponderance of benefit to existing riders, and then also redevelopment potential along that part of the corridor. In terms of supporting transit projects, things were identified like bus bays, where existing service could pull out and improve safety for the buses and for passengers. Some Q-jump opportunities, I'll give you an example. One of those would be looking where Hillsborough Avenue eastbound drops down from 3 lanes to 2 lanes at Highland Avenue. That would be an example of an opportunity where existing Route 34 service could continue up to the Highland, bypass the queue, and then merge back in. And so these are just opportunities to enhance existing service, opportunities for transit signal priority, a low-cost investment to let buses run a little bit more quickly, and then thinking about, station or stop area adjacent ADA accessible path improvements. Also, a host of non-motorized projects were identified, again, to enhance access. We've got missing bicycle or sidewalk facilities. This builds on past work that the City of Tampa and MPO and its partners have worked on to identify non-motorized mobility improvements. And again, this is just another way of making the existing and the planned service work better. In terms of moving along to the second phase of this, basically the overall alignment is 24 miles. Of that, we're looking for a dedicated guideway of 17.5 miles, so a little bit better than 2/3 of the overall length, or 73%. There's a number. I don't have to do math in my head, thank goodness. 34 total stations, of which 8 of these would be island or median stations, and then the majority curbside stations. Most of these, we looked at opportunities to do this without right-of-way impacts. We're avoiding business impacts, really trying to be very streamlined in our approach to make this a implementable project without a lot of adverse impacts. And then you can just see part of the phase 2 was also working out a circulatory loop in the downtown. It makes sense to travel, as we're southbound on Tampa Street, to travel east on Jackson Street, and then south on Meridian, and then loop back over on Cumberland. And what that does is it provides sort of a contraflow circulation that runs interior of the streetcar loop and picks up a lot of those emerging assets in the downtown, and then ties them back into the downtown core, the quad block, and then blast up and out. And so that was a great way. That would all be mixed traffic, but it would add additional ridership and service like USF Health and things like that. For the build alternative, we thought it was important to be able to communicate to you all and to the public what it would actually look like. And so we worked with our team member Vistra to develop these visualizations. Just a couple of highlights along the way to give you a sense of what the service would look like. So this is northbound on Florida Avenue at Columbus, and you can see there basically the busway and the outside lane, and then improved stationary access there on the north side of Columbus. Where possible, we put the stations on the far side of the intersection, as that's a more efficient operational pattern. And this just shows how that could function and look. And this is, again, one opportunity where there's no right-of-way impacts or things like that. Also, as part of this, and it's a little tough to see in the picture, so I'll point it out, and this is actually part of the Heights project that's going forward in the near term, curb extensions to tighten up this intersection and improved sidewalk facilities as well, again, for that overall customer experience. This shows a little bit of a bolder example of a design. This is at Florida Avenue at Yukon by nominally the Home Depot shopping center where I spend my weekends. This is a median guideway section, and so this is showing actually a pair of stations in the roadway median with the bus running through the median guideway. What we really like about this is besides the fact that it provides excellent efficient running time for the buses, it also creates some constraint and enclosure on the roadway. A big part of this project is enhancing overall pedestrian safety, really a complete streets project with the BRT project. And part of the goal here is to get operating speeds down to about 35 miles an hour, which is just tremendously safer for all the road users compared to what occurs out there today, which is posted at 40, but probably people are going significantly faster than that. This shows you that same location from above, and what we're trying to do here is work within the existing roadway. So you see that where it's possible, we have a dedicated bus lane in each direction, so that the buses aren't having to wait for each other and they're able to maneuver through. But where we have constraints, in places, it goes to a single track, very much like the streetcar today. And these are short segments of reversible busway. and they're short enough where the buses can pass each other without interfering with each other or creating undue delay. The reason we do this here is because we want to preserve the left turn for traffic. So again, trying not to have adverse business impacts, disrupting the lives of everybody around the corridor, but still getting the best outcomes for the bus service itself. We also developed a lower cost alternative. Whether you want to look at this as an interim step, we didn't want the agency to absolutely have only one plan A. We wanted to have a plan B too. And as we all know, as we started this project, we had a sales tax. As we're here finishing it, we don't, and we may again. But because of that uncertainty, we thought it was really important to have a lower cost alternative that could be implemented with basically signs, pavement markings, some signalization improvements, and not sort of the median reconstruction aspects of the build alternative. And so this just shows you what that looks like. Same 24-mile alignment, but here only about 11 miles of dedicated bus lanes, so slightly less than half, the remainder being mixed traffic. And these would be business access transit lanes, so right-hand running, not the median guideway, which is sort of the higher cost element. Same number of stations, but more stations along the curbside since we've eliminated the median guideway elements. But otherwise, the same alignment. And what's important, I think, is that to some extent, because of the Heights project, the RAISE grant that was recently awarded, both the build alternative and then the lower cost, more interim alternative are essentially the same from Tyler up through Hillsborough Avenue. And so that first segment is really, there's one plan for that. And then it's some median guideway sections on the northern part of Florida Avenue and on Fowler that would come out of the lower cost alternative. For these two, we had estimated capital costs, and these include the various contingencies we're required to incorporate as part of FTA guidance. The lower cost alternative is about $15 million to build, with an operating cost between $3.2 and $5.1 million. And then the recommended build alternative is significantly more expensive at $57 million, slightly lower operating cost range, and that's simply because it's a little bit of a faster corridor, and so you get more buses per revenue hour put out there. Both of these really negligible right-of-way impacts. A couple of places we identified easements would be necessary to put in station footprints, but nothing in terms of takings for roadway or the guideway itself. And so very low impact from that standpoint and from a NEPA perspective. The recommendation today is from staff is to pursue the lower cost alternative improvements in the southern portion of the corridor. So basically building on the funded RAISE grant project, which is from Tyler to MLK, and begin working to implement the BRT project from downtown headed north. And so that's both the part south of Tyler through downtown where some improvements will be needed. And that concept is consistent more or less with the streetcar project. So it's kind of whoever gets there first as far as that goes. And then also extending the work being done up to MLK, up just through Hillsborough Avenue. Hillsborough Avenue is a pretty critical choke point, and so that's a location where we're looking to realign some things and be able to at least get some Q-jump functionality through there so that the bus isn't going to just fly through there, but it won't have the same delay that the typical commuter does there, which is, for those of us that live in the neighborhood, pretty long. And then also an opportunity to implement some of the supporting east-west transit enhancements, those lower-cost projects that make sense to do, and potentially even non-motorized projects, although typically that falls to the roadway owners. Just to give you an example, these are an example of things that we're looking at Hillsborough. Don't want to get too far in the weeds, but basically trying to squeeze out some space to create a Q-jump for that critical northbound direction, and doing so in a way that doesn't have too severe of impact on the general use traffic. So that's it for me. I'm happy to take any questions you have, and we can refer back to any slides that we need to as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions by the committee members for staff or the presenter? I don't see any hands. Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Thank you. I'm very excited to see this. It's looking good. I'm just have, and I drive Florida Avenue up and down all the time. And basically, it has no choke points but for Hillsborough and Florida, south of, as Florida approaches the Hillsborough Avenue intersection. So I guess I was looking at the queue. I know you explained to Highland, if everybody doesn't drive it all the time, they probably wouldn't understand that. Is there, and I saw that plan here, so is there a queue plan, what's for that, as Florida goes north
Sure.
to Hillsborough, yeah, what
I can
is?
walk through that a little bit, yeah. So basically, right now, with the phase from MLK to Tyler, the concept includes a dedicated busway on the right side, northbound. We'll just talk about Florida Avenue for now, right? And the way that would work is nominally it would be a bus-only lane between traffic signals, and then at traffic signals, so like at Lake, at MLK, it would be right turns and bus only. So that's a compromise we make to try to help moderate, because MLK does get a little, hairy a couple hours of the day. What we'd like to be able to do is to continue that north to Osborne at least. And so you basically have an opportunity here where buses are running up to Osborne in their own dedicated lane. And one of the things that we can do, and this is a little bit, it's a little bit subtle and potentially confusing to folks that aren't traffic engineers, which I'm not either, but I can pretend to be one. What we can do is we can take, now we've got a new signal at Wilder by the Independent, and we also have the signal at Osborne. We can start using those to sort of take that long comet tail of traffic at Hillsborough and meter that a little bit and bring that back. So the idea is that we get the bus up to Osborne, and then that bus has to, and there's a station there, and then the bus will need to merge back into traffic. The reason we have to do that is everything gets very, very tight right there at Violet. And so we have a short section of mixed traffic, but then the intent is to open up that bus and right turn only lane again at Wilder. And then part of that works with, it's a little bit of a thing, but there's also in the morning, because we're mostly focused on the northbound PM, but in the southbound, there are issues through there. And so part of that is to provide space for a left turn lane at Wilder southbound to the high school. So basically what happens every morning is that one car, there's a pretty heavy southbound left turn movement to drop kids off at Hillsborough High. And so that essentially becomes one southbound lane through there anyway. So the idea is to take and have only one southbound lane, continue to have two northbound lanes for traffic, because simply there's just too much traffic to take that away. And then in places have a left turn lane, and in places have a dedicated northbound bus lane. And that will help the bus get to the front. It'll actually help northbound traffic a little bit, because anybody that wants to turn right can also use that. And then at that point, at Hillsborough, the bus merges back in, and it's mixed traffic the way up. Now, I live just north of Sly. Frankly, once you get past Hillsborough, it works pretty good. Sometimes you get stuck at Sly, but it's not horrible. That's where we would be using transit signal priority, so that if there's a bus that's in the runway, you hold the light for a few seconds maybe. And then there's a choke point as well at Waters. There's not much we can do about that. Waters is saturated from absolutely every direction. But then beyond Waters, you'd get into your own dedicated Guideway again. There's a couple of ways to accomplish this. Right now, a lot of people, and what this graphic shows, is a lot of people today will make a right turn. If they're southbound, they'll make a right turn at Hillsborough, travel west. Make a right turn at Hillsborough, travel west on Hillsborough, and then make a left turn at Highland to kind of avoid the delay at that light. And so what this particular concept is showing is that could be basically the full-time movement. So we would have, and there's actually an opportunity, we didn't show this in a low-cost alternative, but in the build alternative, and part of what we would need to look at going forward, there's actually FDOT right-of-way in front of the laundromat and those properties to the west side of Florida that we could actually extend that right turn lane. So that's one option. The other option is to eliminate the northbound left turn lane, which is not that heavily used because there's a thing back at Violet. And that would be another way to accomplish the same thing, in which case it would look more like Nebraska, where you have two lanes at the signal, and then they merge down to one. So those are things that will have to be finalized in the next phase. Probably spent too much time on that, but I appreciate it.
Thank you. For most people's, but I'm imagining it, and I kind of get the idea. But, so it's interesting that it's pretty innovative, I think. In terms of, like, I'm not very familiar. I remember when Nebraska was first laid out, and I was like, wow, I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
The way that, if I could just ask a few more questions. So Fowler Avenue isn't on here. And because I'm very interested in seeing, so I just like to know what's going on with that. I'm very interested in seeing that pursue with the inner, the center, transit lanes rather than the BAT lanes.
Sure, so I can't speak for FDOT, but where they stand, FDOT is doing a PD&E study on Fowler Avenue, and that includes both the segment from Nebraska to Bruce B. Downs, where Hart's BRT alignment is shown. It also extends further east to, I think, 56th Street. I think I'm right about that. And that is basically looking at alternative intersection designs for safety and capacity. The segment from Nebraska to Bruce B. Downs includes 3 transit guideway alternatives. One of them is the BAT lanes, which is essentially similar to Hart's recommended low-cost alternative. The other one is a median guideway alternative, which is very similar to Hart's build alternative, the main difference being that in Hart's alternative, we tried to fit it in while leaving 4 lanes in each direction of general traffic, and it was a bit of a squeeze to get it to work, but we think the smart folks at WSP figured out how to do it. FDOT's alternative, based on some guidance that came out from the MPO to constrain Fowler to 6 lanes, has a median guideway with only 6 general use lanes. In many respects, that makes it much easier to design the median guideway because you have a lot more room. When you do a median guideway on a busy commercial corridor like that, you need to leave places for motor vehicle traffic to be able to make left turns and U-turns to be able to access businesses, and all of the geometry of that works out a lot better when you have more space to play with. And so that's the second FDOT alternative, and then the third one is to do a frontage road concept where the transit vehicles operate in sort of a higher speed inner portion, and this is really hard to describe without a visual, but it was presented at the MPO a few months back, I think. There's sort of a higher speed, really efficient inside corridor, and then business access frontage roads along the side. That one has more sort of drainage, and it's a kind of a tougher project to build, but that's why they do the PD&E, so they can flush out those details. And so their process is to start that project within about 2 months, and I think they have about a 1-year schedule.
Chair
Okay.
Schisler, if I may, just to clarify that what was just explained is not in the scope of this BRT.
No.
So this presentation is specifically about our BRT scope in this, Phase 2A, and just getting some feedback from the committee on where we are with Phase 2A. So I just
Okay.
want to be clear that everything that was explained and was done very well, but that is not a part of the scope of this study.
I've got it.
Thank you.
I didn't have it quite, so thank you.
Appreciate the
But
clarification, thanks.
it just keeps coming, so it's difficult to discern, I think, for me or us, kind of where the lines are drawn and how it works.
A lot of moving parts, yeah.
So with that, too, when we're talking about scope and everything, and I was very interested in the generated fiscal side of this. And so is that, when we go to that, and we're talking about the costs here, this is excluding Fowler Avenue then?
So when we did the cost for the build alternative, we included the whole thing. And
Okay.
so it's inclusive of any matching dollars that might, like, for example, the Raise Grant project, which has roadway improvements, but also significant drainage improvements. This doesn't include the drainage part of that, but it just says this is what it would take to build the whole thing. Now, if other partners come along and do bits of it before we get to it, then that's a win, and it would draw down from our cost. On the FDOT project, I'm not sure where their funding sits. I know they've got some funding out there for construction, but I think most of that is focused towards some of the intersection improvements, but I really don't have a good answer on that.
And then,
Fowler.
and then in terms of the operating costs, I see it's really de minimis in terms of operating, which is what I always am really paying attention to. De minimis between the lower cost alternative, 3.2, and the recommended build alternative. And when we talk about operating costs, what are we looking at in terms of, timing for vehicles, frequency?
I'll let, so I think the assumptions here are certainly better than 15 minutes. And I'm going to let, if Scott's got, because Scott Pringle is on the line too, and he's more on that side of the equation. But I think, ideally we'd be looking for a 10 to 12 minute headway.
That would be excellent.
And so.
Correct, Daniel.
Oh, hey, thanks, Scott. I'm glad. It's nice to be correct. But that's the goal here. So better than, about the best service we have today is on a 15-minute.
Right.
And in the southern part of the corridor, you actually do better than that because you have the Route 6 that overlays, and we would anticipate that route being able to use the facility as well up to the point where it breaks off. And so there's some advantages to that also.
For Hillsborough County, that would be absolutely transformative and revolutionary practically in terms of how our frequency of buses, is not near this kind of frequency.
Sure.
And then I have another question here, if I could just, fiscal again.
We have others waiting too, so.
Oh, okay, good. I hadn't known that anybody else was going to ask questions, so the alternatives, the capital cost of the lower cost is, of course, like 15 million. The higher cost is close to 57 million. And are those costs, I mean, for Hart, it's like shelter costs, vehicle costs, I guess. Are those costs mostly, is there a breakdown? Like, how does this work with FDOT and their costs in the road building?
So I'll talk a little bit, and again, make Scott available to help me if I say something wrong. But the difference in the cost estimates is essentially that the low-cost alternative doesn't have that roadway reconstruction, the median Guideway component. The other difference is that we had different investment levels for stations, and more of the stations in the lower-cost alternative are more basic station areas. But the majority of the difference in the cost is those couple of median Guideway segments where it's not a full road reconstruction because we're being very careful not to impact the curb lines, the drainage, all the underground utilities, which gets really, really expensive, and of course, avoiding right-of-way impacts. But we still need to tear up the median of the road and reconstruct that. And then that, sort of by its nature, puts a higher grade level of station to create enough structure and mass in the median where customers feel comfortable being out there. And so it's mostly the roadway component, but some station component. I'm not sure if the assumptions are the same for the BRT vehicles. That would be a maybe Scott chime in question, but it's mostly the roadway part that creates that difference.
I would say, too, that if we are able to do this, that there would be one BRT project in Hillsborough County, and people, I think, are not familiar with what that means, and it would be, it would really change the way people look at that. So I'm just very excited about this moving forward.
Fantastic. And I will mention, to go back, and I probably ran over this a little bit quickly, but as part of the recommendation, it's to implement that guideway on the one-way pair from Tyler to MLK, where we have the opportunity to do it today. We have the existing Route 1 and the existing Route 6 operating there. If we could do anything to maybe further enhance that would be fantastic. But also as part of this, there's an estimate of about $300,000 to upgrade, basically to provide more quality stations on that part of the corridor. And that would be this very short-term enhancement to help move things along.
Thanks.
Commissioner Oberman, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. And Damian, thank you very much for your presentation. You brought a lot to the table. And I too, am so glad that I've been fighting for the Wilder Avenue light for like 8 years to finally have one there so you could plan around it. But I did notice that when you're coming southbound on Florida, the actual Wilder intersection going to the high school is well before the light. And so there's not a way of actually making that left at the light. You make it well before the light. And so I'm sure that that's going to take some retrofitting and getting used to. But it's great to see the work that you've done. Thank you very much. What I also, in line with what Commissioner Kemp was referencing, is the estimated capital and costs. And the recommended build alternative includes a great deal of road resurfacing, redevelopment, sidewalk work, I would assume, as well as intersection improvement. So and what I'm trying to discern is, granted, we need to have the road resurfaced and redone and sidewalks all done, whether or not Hart has a BRT or not in that area. So of the capital cost, what percentage would actually fall on the other partners? So, for example, the City of Tampa, FDOT, and as well as the resources that we might have if we have a surtax that would would have within it buckets associated with sidewalk improvements, intersection timing, Vision Zero, all of those things that are embedded in this project. So, but technically, Hart shouldn't take it all on. We would have to have partners here. So I'm curious, as well as it would then qualify us for matching dollars for FTA grants as well as other infrastructure build grants. I'm curious in your capital estimates, how much breaks down that would actually be necessary. It looks like it's a $40 million difference if you really look at the two.
Right.
You have, 15 million and 56 or 57. It looks like a $13-14 million difference. And is that because technically, if there weren't a BRT, we have, $40 million worth of road restructuring that needs to occur to meet our transportation needs and improving our transportation, envelope on Florida Avenue.
Yeah.
Is that
I think I'm going to see if Scott can jump in on this one. I know that for the most part that there's some differences where you've got the Heights project that did contemplate reconstruction of sidewalks. That was all being funded through FDOT, the RAISE grant, and MPO funding. North of there, I don't know that the BRT project estimate doesn't contemplate the same level of like sidewalk reconstruction and things like that. So any of the sort of anything outside of the roadway envelope itself would basically be station areas. But you are correct. Part of this, I'll just give you an example. Along Linebaugh, that includes some widening of the roadway, resurfacing, basically a reconstruction of Linebaugh Avenue, and right now that is being incorporated with the Hart BRT project. But it's fair to say that there are needs on Linebaugh already, and if there were an opportunity to have that have parts of that be part of the city's moves program, then that would be an opportunity for cost sharing and potentially increasing those local matching dollars. I don't have the details of the specifics of that cost estimate with me. I'm going to see if Scott can jump in, but if not, we'll have to bring you back a better breakdown of that.
And the reason I ask is that it's very clear, even though it's a small amount, if the build alternative allows Hart to lower its annual operating cost and achieve a higher level of revenues due to the frequency and bus ridership impact, there's a reason why we need to look at the long game. And with interest rates as low as they are, sometimes penny pitching doesn't get you where you need to go, over the long haul. And that's why I asked the question. Thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing from Scott.
Thank you. I see no other hands. I do have one comment, if I may, regarding the operating cost estimates and so forth. Are these incremental over existing routes, or are these just, this is going to change and this is what it's going to be now?
Scott? Did you hear the question?
Hello?
We didn't have technical difficulties, because I know we've got, part of this assumes a reduction in the, so right now.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you very well.
Just talk closer.
Yeah, so this does assume a reduction in the Route 1 operating from 15-minute to 30-minute headways, and so some of that cost would be recouped. But to a large extent, this is a new service in the corridor, so everything along Fowler is new, and so I think that this is mostly what would be an added cost rather than this would be additional cost beyond what.
Any expected increase in ridership, or what were the projections on that?
The overall, so when you implement this service in the corridor, you lose some riders from Route 1, but you have a net increase of about 5,000 riders in the corridor.
I'm sorry, how many?
5,000.
5,000 riders? Okay, because the caveat to that
That's
is
pretty
that finance needs to be able to crank these kind of numbers into the budget
That's right.
going forward, because we still got to pay the bill. We can't count on the sales tax passing at this point until it's actually done. So we need to be as conservative as possible, and I know staff is sensitive to that, and we'll work towards that. See no other questions. I see no other hands raised. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, we have operation and maintenance metrics reports. Mr. Stephen Fields, Manager of Transit Logistics, will present the operations and maintenance metrics reports for January and February 2022.
Morning, Chair Cicely, Commissioners, Director, RT. Name's Stephen Fields. I am the Manager of Transit Logistics for the Operations Maintenance Metric Report for January and February. Missed trips. As you see, we made a significant change in our missed trips. January, we had a total trips of 44,574, completion trips of 99.87%. In February, we completed 99.9% of our trips, with total trips of 40,699. As you see, as in the trips that we missed was more of bio and some incidents that we had on the buses. And we had one where we had an accident on February the 10th. February on-time performance. January was at 81%. In February, we dropped down to 78% due to a lot of traffic and a lot of other incidents along our routes, and it brought our percentage down, but we're working diligently to get that percentage back up to 80 plus. February on-time performance by route. As you see the low-hanging fruit that we have, which is Route 14, Route 10, we have made significant changes on those routes. Currently for the month of March, Route 10 is running at 96% on-time performance. We changed the running times and added some resources to help us to acquire the 96% on-time performance for the month of March. For Route 14, we also made significant changes. It's running at 80% on-time performance. And we also made some changes on those particular routes also. So now our customers are able to get where they need to go on time with our on-time performance. We're still working on the other routes to make sure that they're good above the national average of 77%. Our mean distance between roll calls. In February, we had 147 roll calls. Roll calls per trip is at 0.36%. That is a little up from January of 0.30%. February fleet availability. In January, it was at 78.72%, with a goal of 85%. In February, we achieved our goal of 83.56%. On February the 13th, a significant change was made. We introduced 16 new buses, so our percentage went up 86% and lasted throughout the month, and we dropped down on the 24th to 82%. Preventive maintenance. In January, we had 103 buses inspected. In February, we had 88. The reason why the number went down in February, it was only 28 days in the month. And also, we brought on 16 new buses, so they didn't need the inspection for the month of February. January, February, fleet cleanliness. Deep cleaning, which happened every 45 days for our buses. Our goal is 90%. We cleaned 371 buses. In January, we did 182 deep cleans. And that's where they come in and they do a deep clean on the bus to make sure everything is wiped down from top to bottom on that. In February, we did 189 of deep cleaning. The on-time compliance for January was 91%. In February, it's 93%. Daily sanitation for January, we total sanitized of 4,518 buses, vehicles, and 3,223 buses for that month, and 1,200 vans. In the month of February, total vehicles sanitized was 4,484, with buses right at 3,200 and vans at 1,285. Biohazards in January, we had 31 reported incidents, and February we had 20. January safety and security incidents. As you see on buses, we had a lot of incidents that happened on the buses where they slips and fall. And that happens when people getting on or off the buses or incident that happened on the bus. We had a significant, as a net increased number that happened as in slips and falls. Excuse me. First aid EMS bus, we had 5 that was called to our transfer centers to render aid to customers. Verbal altercations. We had 1 that was safety, 3 that was security, 1 paratransit, and 3 bus. And those also refer to us as some on the buses and at our transfer centers that we have to call TPD or EMS to get there to help us out. But it was not on an operator as in verbal altercation between customers. Fixed mirrors incidents on buses, we had 4. Disturbance, safety had 2, security had 2, and bus we had 4. And all these are customers and not on operators. We trespassed a total of 4 people for the month of January. Property damage, we had 1 on the bus and 2 for security and 1 for other. And the other is someone damaged a car. On the bus, some customers, they do take out their anger on our vehicles, and they broke a glass on one of the buses. Employee injuries, I had 1 that happened on the bus where an employee got sick. It was not because of an incident accident. An employee got sick, and we had to have emergency service come and render aid to them. January accident by mode. On bus, we went up to 14 as in POV that hit hard. So that is where someone hit us and we not hit them. We had 1 for heart, 1 for hit mirrors. Paratransit, the same as in 5 for PV hitting us, and 0 for the month. And streetcar, 0 accidents. February, safety and security incidents. Safety had 29 safety incidents and 1 security one. And a lot of this happened at our transfer centers where customers are really with our security force or the supervisors, and we have to have them to come in, slips and falls where they fall on the bus or at the transfer centers, and we render aid to them. First aid had 6, it was safety, that's our transfer centers. Verbal altercation again, not with operators, only customers. Fixed object mirrors, we had 8 safety. Disturbance again, not with operators, but with customers. On customers, not customers on operators. Trespass, we trespassed 2 for the month. Property damage again, safety issues had 2 property damage. And employee injuries, and those are all safety things that happen on the bus where operators was getting on the bus and slip or walking in the parking lot and had an incident. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions? Commissioner, Director Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for your, I was going to say thank you for your overview. It was very thorough. I had some questions, and if we could probably backtrack and start with the first or second page, first page. Is that the first page?
Can you repeat the question? We couldn't hear you.
Yes. Is
Which
that-
page?
Is that the first page you went through? I just have a couple of pages to ask questions on.
The first slide, Mr. Fields. Slide 1. Or I guess slide 2 after the
It's
title
slide
slide.
2.
Okay, on this slide, yep, one more back.
One more back?
Yes, this is the first slide, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, on this slide, does this represent just 4 accidents or 1 accident or one missed trip? Does that represent 1?
Yes, ma'am, that represents
Okay.
1.
Okay, so for the most part, 44,000 trips, 40,000 trips in January and February respectively, and those are just representative of 1 trip on the chart?
This is for the month of February, the chart is. The blip that's up there shows January. It does not have the numbers at the bottom. This is just for the month of February at the bottom.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's great work, so thank you. I just want to make sure it represented 1, a single miss.
Yes, ma'am.
Very good, thank you. Next page, please. The difference between the standard and the goal, could you give me some additional insight on what that means?
Yes, the standard across the nation is 77% on-time performance out of most of your transit agencies. Here at Hart, we set our goal above that because we want to achieve more than what the average, national average is. So we set our goal at 85%.
Okay, thank you very much. Next page. You mentioned two trips here, one that was trip 10 and one was trip 14?
Yes, ma'am.
And what changes did you make to elevate or increase the performance rate for those 2 trips?
Yes, ma'am. On Route 10, the frequency used to be 1 hour, and we was running at 40% on-time performance. We increased the running time and changed it to 40 minutes frequency and added a bus. And with
Okay.
that brought our frequency to 40 minutes and our on-time performance up to 96%, vice 40%.
Okay, that's great performance, bringing it from 1 hour to 40 minutes and then additional bus. So I'm not sure if you're voice tracking this when you go over it with us, but that's phenomenal. So good
Yes,
work
ma'am.
there. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for those 2 buses. Now, is your plan to look at these on a regular basis and a couple of more as you see them dip, you'll try to put the same initiatives in place?
Yes, ma'am. We're working
Okay.
with Nelson and Night Guard to bring up the others that's below the 77 standard percent to get those up over 85.
Very good. That's good work. Thank you for that. And then there's one more page. One more after that one, please. That's not the slide, but I'll go ahead and ask the question. You talked about cleanliness of buses, and then January, there was, this is the slide, cleanliness of buses, and then it talks about the number of vehicles that have been sanitized. Is there a certain baseline that you utilize to determine how many need to be cleaned and how many are sanitized?
No, ma'am. We just have a deep cleaning that we clean at least 90% of our fleet throughout the month. That's the goal. And we met our goal of 91% in January and 93% in February. So it's a
Okay.
goal. So it's not a set number that we have in place. We got to reach a goal of 90% or higher.
Okay, and then the same would be for sanitizing the buses, daily sanitation?
Yes, that's a daily sanitation. There's no number set for that. As the buses come in each evening, we have to clean those buses, make sure they're ready to go back out, clean and sanitize for our customers.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the time you spent with me to further clarify.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
appreciate your overview. Thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Thank you, and thanks for those questions. It's always good to learn more about how those things are done, but this is just excellent in terms of transparency, not wallpapering over the problems, but graphed out so well for us to kind of understand and see where the problems are and then what's being done about it. So I think it's really excellent. It gives me so much confidence, and it makes me really proud of Hart and its service. And we know that we're doing a great job with the resources that we have. So I think it's really great to have it be graphed this way. I want to appreciate the staff, Ms. LeGrand. I just think this is a real step up.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions for Mr. Fields? I do have one, two quick ones. You may not be able to answer this. The status of the radio system within the buses.
Good morning, Scott Drainville, Chief of Maintenance and Transportation. So right now, our system is old, but we are looking at, we're gonna put out we're gonna incorporate that back into our CAD AVL. We're hoping to have something out for procurement in the next few months. So that's where we're gonna go back to, we did fast track but after going through and researching it, it's more advantageous to Hart to add in the radios with the CAD AVL system.
Okay. All right, because we got lucky last time. We may not get lucky the next time we have that issue. And my second question is, the new buses that are going online, A, congratulations with those for putting them in service, but B, are they already coming pre-installed with the protective barriers for the operators, or do we have to retrofit?
They come pre already.
Good. Okay, thank you. I see no other hands raised.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chief.
Oh. Director Knight, you're recognized.
Yes, and again, thanks for the presentation and also the questions and everything. But one question I have to ask is, the few areas that down to 77%, and like to get them up to 85, it was commendable even in the 90s. But the areas that gonna try to get up even further over 85. Do you have all the resources and things needed to have achieved those things, and how things going in that area? I know with this pandemic and everything that we're getting through, and to do all these things and to share great progress is commendable. But I like to make sure that is there everything you have, or anything that we can do on our end to even help you even more. If you could, you can touch on it.
Thank you for those comments, sir. At the present time, we're working on to hire more operators to get our budget number up. Besides that, we have everything that we need to make the on-time performance 85 plus for all routes.
Okay, so there's going to be some more hiring that is already in progress?
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, and any other questions from any other director? Thank you, Mr. Fields. Great presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving on, the Hart Strategic Financial Advisory Services. Next, we'll have Amanda Vandergriff from InfoStrategies will present the Hart Strategic Financial Advisory Services presentation, and Ms. Sharon Green is virtually attending to assist. Welcome.
Thank you. And I believe Sharon Green's having a little bit of technical difficulties, but hopefully she can jump on as I begin presenting. So we last talked to this committee in January, and we talked about the work that we've been doing the past year on the financial model and the great news that the infrastructure bill passed, changing the modeling effort and us needing to do a little more work in the model with the new infrastructure bill funding included. So we'll show you what that looks like today. We'll also show you our revised financial scenarios for the first time and our key findings, and then talk about next steps for the final few tasks that we're working on for Hart. So the infrastructure bill passed in November, and with that infrastructure bill comes new federal formula funding, increases of around 30% for Hart in annual funding beginning in fiscal year 22. We're looking at a 33% estimate in Florida. We're, just to be conservative, assuming 30% in the model for now. We did receive full appropriations just a few weeks ago from Congress, so everything's looking good to see, over 30%, but to be conservative, we're looking at 30% in the model. That's between your previous numbers in 21 to 22. And then from 22 onward, we're assuming a growth of 2%, which is lower than what we're expecting to see, which is about 2.1%. So that's just to be conservative. That's a total increase between last year and this year of $5.8 million in annual revenue. So we included that in the model. And just to mention too, that we're assuming a growth from your federal funding actuals, which is what you report in your annual financial reports, not your actual allocations or your awards. Last year you received $16.4 million in your federal formula funds, and you used a portion of that plus prior year apportionments plus other capital discretionary grants, a total of $19.2 million in fiscal year 21. We're also assuming in the model over the next few years that HART spends down its carryover formula funds, which we have about $12.3 million assumed in the model. So in January, I showed you a simplistic view of this unconstrained capital and operating cost program. So we're calling it an unconstrained list. All of your capital and operating needs estimated over the next 30 years, both your existing service, your transit development plan projects that you've listed as funded, your share of the HART TECO streetcar, which was submitted to FTA in the financial plan, and then finally a very large bucket of unfunded TDP projects. All of that totals to an estimated $17.8 billion. That includes both capital and operating. A big portion of that is just continuing your existing service, which is primarily operating costs. So that's the bottom box here, $6.6 billion, which accounts for about 37% of your total needs. Most of that is operating. Your funded TDP projects, which are listed in your most recent TDP, include bus service improvements, paratransit improvements, and that's both capital and operating. The biggest item is your paratransit operating costs. That accounts for about 6% of your total needs. Your TECO streetcar extension, which is your capital, and your operating shares submitted to FDA, that's about 1% of the needs over the 30-year period. And this big bucket of unfunded TDP projects is about $10 billion. It equates to about 56% of that full list of unfunded needs. That big bucket, that $10 billion bucket, includes frequency improvements, innovative solutions, your on-demand microtransit projects, your state of good repair capital replacement program, new routes that you might want to bring online, capital projects, both system and transit centers, as well as any of your fixed Guideway projects that you're planning. Just to mention too that every capital project that you have included in your TDP has a very large operating component to it. So actually, if you look at the total program, $17.8 billion, the vast majority is operating. So that was the list we used to develop the scenarios we'll show you in a moment. The first scenario is going to look at your baseline. So what do you have today, and how does the infrastructure bill impact that baseline, which we're calling your existing conditions? Scenario 2, we look at your existing conditions with the infrastructure bill funding, and then add that ferry service, which you were successful in receiving a grant for just recently. Scenario 3 then looks at your existing conditions plus the bill funding, and then looking at your funded TDP projects. And finally, scenario 3 will look at the sales surtax and what that would look like in the model. So your prior baseline, which is before the infrastructure bill passed, we were modeling a fiscal cliff in 2026. And just to orient you to this did not include any of your TDP projects that were listed in your most recent TDP as funded. It didn't include the HART share of the TECO streetcar extension as submitted to FDA. This just looked at what we were projecting to be your future capital and operating needs to continue existing service. Now, with the infrastructure bill, we're adding $5.8 million each year we shift our fiscal cliff back 1 year to 2027. So that was the change between the infrastructure bill funding. And for scenario 1, we added the ferry grant and the ferry service to your baseline. And we're assuming several things here to be very conservative. And congratulations, by the way, that's a really exciting grant award. And it's great to include it in the model on the baseline. This is being very conservative, knowing that this is going to be funded through a partnership. If HART were to take on all the capital and operating costs associated with the ferry alone, this would shift your fiscal cliff all the way back to 2026, which is where we were before the infrastructure bill passed. So just to demonstrate the importance of partnership funding for this service. So let's talk about the fiscal cliff. We mentioned it back in January, talked very high level about the fiscal cliff. We're now looking at a fiscal cliff somewhere between 26 and 27, depending on what you determine is your baseline. So this fiscal cliff, you mentioned last January that this has been discussed prior to this year, that there has been a fiscal cliff. And I would say with the COVID relief funds and this new infrastructure bill, it allows you to push that fiscal cliff off a bit. You're able to sustain your existing operating needs in the next few years, but you will ultimately reach that fiscal cliff somewhere between 26 and 27. Your revenue impacts related to COVID-19 were much lower than your cost impacts. Your revenue impacts were about $103.4 million in total one-time relief funds, which you'll be using over the next few years to sustain operating needs. Your IIJA, your infrastructure bill, is at $5.8 million annually. But on the cost side, HART has seen growth of about 9.3% annually over the past 3 years. This is actually anticipated to increase, and we're seeing that across the country as transit agencies are looking to retain their workers. And you add to that discrepancy between costs and revenue, there's also a growth factor that the costs are growing at a much higher rate than your revenue. So we're looking at a 3.7% growth in your costs compared to less than 3% growth in your revenue. This is primarily an operating fiscal cliff. Most of those impacts are occurring in your biggest budget item, which is your operating budget. You have abnormally high operating costs, labor and material shortages, and your passenger fare revenue is lower than pre-COVID. That growth rate on just the operating side, you can see it's driving the fiscal cliff, the 3.7% growth on the operating cost side, and the 3% growth on the operating revenue. So you can see this breakdown now, the graph I showed you before, where the yellow in the carryover funds, that's your operating costs, and then the blue is your capital costs. So it's really being driven by the operating budget. So we looked at scenario 2, which then looked at your existing conditions and added your funded TDP projects. And I mentioned earlier, the biggest piece of your funded TDP projects in your most recent TDP, which I know you're currently doing an update right now, it was about $1 billion in costs associated primarily with paratransit improvements, paratransit operations and capital costs, as well as some fixed, bus service improvements, frequency improvements. So if you add that $1 billion to the baseline, you shift your fiscal cliff up a few years to fiscal year 2025. This does not include the TICO streetcar extension. Finally, scenario 3, which is the sales surtax. So if a sales surtax is passed and you have a 45% share of that 1% increase, and you have those infrastructure bill funds, we looked at one snapshot of a program that could be funded through this new revenue stream. And just to mention, we were able to turn on all of HART's existing service, the funded TDP projects I mentioned, which is about $1 billion in improvements, and the TICO streetcar extension, which is just HART's share that was submitted to FTA. And finally, we were able to fund up to 32% of your unfunded bucket. Just to note that you're not able to fund all of those projects with this limited revenue stream, but you'd be able to fund a good portion of them. And I also want to mention too, in this scenario, we modeled for the first time Hart would be issuing debt. And that would occur in the late 2020s. And if you turned every project on and you had the sales surtax passed, you would not be able to fund all of your projects, but we're showing you what that would look like here. You'd have about $5.2 billion in a funding gap of $5.2 billion. And your fiscal cliff would then be in 2025. So key findings, we have a fiscal cliff that we're projecting in fiscal year 2027, and that will occur if Hart continues its existing service without reducing your operating costs, reducing service, or adding a revenue stream. Your fiscal cliff is primarily an operating cliff, and it's due to your operating costs being higher than your operating revenue. And in the near term, the COVID relief funds and the infrastructure bill increases are helping you sustain those costs for the next few years. Without additional funding, you are not in a position to fund the TECO streetcar shares that were submitted to the FTA, fund the funded projects in the TDP, or any of the other unfunded projects that we talked about earlier. 45% of the sales surtax would allow Hart to fund all of those improvements, the funded TDP projects, the TECO streetcar extension shares, and 32% of your unfunded program of projects. So we're looking to brief the board in April, the full board in April, on these slides and the findings that we have. We also would like to take the model and incorporate Hart's preliminary 5-year capital plan, which I know Hart is currently working on, so you can have a better picture of and do some planning on your capital side over the next few years. And we'll incorporate that in the model and then hand it off to Hart staff looking for a financial modeling training session very soon. And I think that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. I see some hands. Commissioner Oberman?
Thank you, and thank you very much for that report. And in light of what we've just heard, I can't say how pleased I am with the presentation that Ms. LeGrand made at our workshop on transportation, making the economic statement about how we get a ROI on our economy when we invest in transit, because it's obvious that without that focus, we're going to be in trouble if we don't have not only a surtax, but also we don't have the ability to take advantage of the IIJ dollars, because it does put us in a good position. But I am concerned that without a clear focus on the need for additional revenues, no matter the scenario, I would love to get some feedback eventually on what communities have done in order to increase their revenue streams beyond just increasing their network and their ridership, or the combination of the two. I truly believe our ridership would improve if our frequency would improve, and if that then turns into increased revenues to offset our operating costs, that may be a good thing. If you could help me understand the slide that talks about, primarily an operating cliff, it's slide number 10. There's, you talk about the COVID costs, which we understand that there were costs high associated with COVID, but abnormally high operating costs seems to be a theme all the way through. Is part of your process helping us understand what that truly means? In other words, is it high because we have a low number of buses and a low number of routes, and so the operating cost is high per bus or per route? Or is it that we have, so we can't spread the cost across more? Or are there other ways that we raise our revenues rather than, increasing by either increasing our routes, which correlates to higher costs? I'm trying to figure out, how do we increase our revenues and still address the fact that we've got a county that's growing leaps and bounds and a terrible congestion problem that can be partially solved, by investing in transit and making the argument as such. So understanding that high operating cost is an important part that this board needs to understand so that we recognize how to best move forward in our strategic planning. And I'll stop there with the question.
I think the first piece, the operating costs increased primarily due to labor and material shortages, but it is not anticipated to drop back down. This is something that the entire industry is dealing with right now. You are not alone. And we do expect that it might actually go up a bit more as well, looking at the current industry and the current markets. So that's something that Hart will need to look at in the 5-year plan that you're developing, and adjust for that, because this operating revenue, it's not going to increase substantially unless you add a new revenue stream. If you have the sales surtax, that will provide that revenue that you need to address this new operating costs level. There are other funding sources that we looked at and we talked about in January as well that could provide that long-term revenue needed to support operating as well. Does that answer your question? I think might be a broader question.
Yeah, it does. It does to some degree, and I appreciate that. What is, I think, obvious in your charts is how critically important it is that we have the matching dollars to qualify for some of the funding here. Is that relayed in the comparison between scenario 2 and 3?
Between scenario 2 and 3? Yes. So having the committed long-term revenue stream is what you need to be able to secure the grant opportunities that are available. And those grant opportunities are only available and guaranteed over the next 5 years, from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 26. Without that funding stream, you would not be able to compete for those grant opportunities. It's very important to secure those funds to be able to compete. It is also nice that you're lining up this new 5-year capital plan with that infrastructure bill, so you can really start thinking strategically about how to use the resources you have, both if the sales surtax passes or if it does not.
Okay, and then given that there's been, FDOT has actually considered making some shifts and changes in its SIS dollars and possibly making the operating funds available to transit agency or transit investment. Has that been considered as part of this strategy, or is that not really on the table?
I think that should be considered as part of this strategy. We can incorporate that into the model before we hand it off to Hart.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your information. This is excellent information for helping us decide how to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Director Williams, your hand.
Just a quick question. My question was centered on what Commissioner Overman asked about the operating cost. And has that risen just over the last few years, or did something happen all of a sudden that caused us to see more abnormal costs? Just trying to understand what's taking place.
So if you look pre-COVID in 2017 and 2018, you can see your dark bar, the first few dark bars, that's where your operating cost was. And you can see from 2018 to 2019 to 2020, a massive increase in your operating costs compared to historicals. And again, you're not alone. The entire industry is dealing with a very similar increase. I see this in every model I'm developing right now across the country. So this is occurring because of labor shortages in the market we're currently in right now. Just requires higher costs to operate for labor.
Okay, and labor means people?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Commissioner Kemp?
Thank you.
You're recognized.
Again, thank you, Ms. LeGrand, for seeing this done. I just think it is so extraordinarily important, and I think it's something that we have, as a board, have never had it so graphically and so compellingly laid out. I will say, again, I've been on the board 5 years, but the first 3, we were on the edge of the fiscal cliff then. We had been on the edge of the fiscal cliff. The only thing that, we were off the edge of the fiscal cliff, to tell you the truth. That is what Mission Max was about. It was just about cutting costs. And I frequently was afraid that we would spend all our resources down, that we would not be able to make payroll, quite honestly. I know it wasn't, I think because other people thought there was maybe some other source besides what we called our reserve, but wasn't really our reserve, it was our operating costs. We didn't have a reserve, honestly. So this, I think, really graphically lays it out. What is important too, I know we're focused on operations here, but from everything I've ever known across the country, everywhere, every transit system for decades and decades has been approximately 70% of all its costs is operations. That is the basis of it. And the more service you give, the more cost incurred. You don't make it by revenue. That is the nature of transit. That's the nature of the business that we're in here. I was interested to see, instead of 70%, that I've always heard is an earmark, that on slide 4, it said 81% operating. Is that kind of what we're looking at as a new standard, or is that just?
No, that's an indicator of the program that you have here. So you have a program that's focused on improving frequency for your existing routes and then adding new routes. So that has a lot of operating costs associated with it. So that's what you're seeing here is we're not looking at just a program of fixed guideway improvements. We're looking at a program that includes several service improvements, increasing frequencies up to 15 minutes. So that has a very large annual operating cost over 30 years.
And also on every system I've ever seen, there's been maybe 15 to, I think maybe the highest, I don't even know, we're close to the highest of 20% revenue through bus operations, collections, fares. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty standard. So you don't really make up your costs for that. Again, it's like the more operations you run, the more you are indebted. So you have to think of other sources. I just thought this was just so compelling to understand and look at it in this way. And I think for me, it sets in mind, again, I think it's important for all of us to keep in mind that HART is the most underfunded system in the nation, bar none, for a metro area this size, not by just a small amount, but by a very large, significant amount. We've been operating on the fiscal cliff. We're funded through a very, very low ad valorem sources, and it just does not, it is not suitable. We're living on poverty wages here in terms of our transit system. I think it is also shows for me, the difference, for instance, as a county commissioner, one who will be looking at this, the difference between the 45% set aside and the 40% set aside is all the more critical in terms of funding this system. And even with that, we're going to have to look at other things, because it shows that even if we got that full 45%, if it goes on the ballot and if the voters support it, that we'll be able to do just our operations as they are now, our streetcar extension capital, I guess, and then as well 32% of the unfunded operations. And I think for a long time we've projected a lot of kind of projects that were just without recognizing what the costs would be and what we could do. Also, I appreciate the distinctions you made with the ferry service. As you know, I've been extremely involved with that. And one of the sources that we would receive from the ferry revenue source revenue now, or that we could use to support the ferry service now, as it's designated and agreed as we move forward, is going to be that the HMS already has agreed. Our costs are what make it impossible for us to do more service. But that was something contractually that we can have, that they're willing to do if we move forward with the way that contract, which is done. I just think it's important for people to recognize that would be another stream of income, which would make that sustainable, which was always the object and desire of how we moved forward with the ferry service. But I think this is very compelling, tells the story in a way that, it's unfortunate that we've always lived on the fiscal cliff. We've kind of normalized the fiscal cliff here in Hillsborough County, unfortunately, for transit. And I hope that we can see that moving ahead, but this is really gives us a very, very graphically clear picture of where and how we stand and what we need to, what our challenges, our significant challenges are in the future for how we move HART forward.
Director Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again for the presentation. As Commissioner Kemp was saying, I think this, laid it out as easily as possible, and it's certainly eye-opening with some of the numbers. And anytime that you're going to be using the term fiscal cliff, I think that is going to be something that's going to get everybody's attention, and hopefully it is going to be getting everybody's attention. Would you go to the last slide? I'm sorry, I wasn't able to page through there myself. I'd already gone and taken a look at this.
This one, or?
This one, yes, as far as on the next step. So I know that we're looking to be able to try and get the 5-year plan up and running, and also trying to be able to brief the whole board on how this works. And this is probably more a Ms. LeGrand question, as far as when the presentation on the 5-year plan would end up coming up, what kind of a timeline are we on with that?
So I'm going to call on Ms. Kurt, who's leading the development of the 5-year plan.
Good morning to Chair Schistler, Mr. Grant, and members of the Joint Committee. The first look at the 5-year plan will be in June. The HART Charter states that we are to present the tentative capital and operating budget at your June board meeting, so you'll see it in June.
Okay, so we're going to stay on the regular budget cycle as far as for the 5-year plan and just the regular budget.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would just note that in the past few years, you've seen a annual capital budget. Your financial policies do dictate that you should have a 5-year plan, and you will see a 5-year plan in June.
And that's where I was going on that. I know that we've had some issues on that in previous years, and Ms. LeGrand and I have had this conversation over and over about the need for a 5-year plan, the importance of a 5-year plan, because with something like this, you have to be thinking a lot more long-term. And with this fiscal cliff that we're looking at, in transportation, time, that's 5 years isn't very long, and so the faster we can get that, the better. I just want to be able to try and make sure that we are going to be looking at these findings and everything that's in this report, which again, is a great report, that the time that we're having the report given to us at the full board, we're having the ability to be able to get right on that 5-year plan as soon as possible. So we're keeping things moving forward, but we're not forgetting everything that's, basically been told to us right here. We're going to be able to move that forward quickly and be able to jump on some of the bigger issues that we're going to be, having to face with. Again, fiscal cliffs usually don't all mean easy decisions. So just as long as we're be able to move that forward quickly. But thank you again for it was a great report.
Thank you.
Director Hudson.
Thanks. Just one request for the April 4th presentation. I think it would be helpful to understand what the drawdown is in terms of federal and state matching funds. What is the potential range. And if that's not something that's susceptible to a range, then that's fine. But I'd like to understand, when we talk about a local revenue source in the form of the portion of the surtax, what does that mean in terms of the ability to draw down federal funds on a dollar per dollar ROI? If there's other places, Phoenix comes to mind, Seattle, other places that have adopted a surtax, is there a way to show what that has brought back into the community? And again, if the data is garbage and it's a range from $1 to $300, that's not helpful. But if there is helpful data out there, that would provide some pretty important context, I think, for the full board as we sort of grapple with what you've shown.
Yes, I think we can definitely show that. There are several regions who are advancing programs and projects with sales tax revenue and federal grants through the Capital Investment Grant Program, but also
Yeah,
through
probably let's just look at federal, and then I guess for state and only other Florida. I mean, I don't really care how it works in North Carolina or Mecklenburg County, but I think within the state of Florida and federal, that would be super helpful.
That'd be great. We can do that.
Thanks.
Yes, Commissioner Kent.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion, or that would be a great way to look at it. I'm also interested in seeing, in particular for the ferry, if this funding source were available, as in the operating costs of not having the operating costs and other potential sources for that, how that would look, if we could model that too, since that is imminent. That would be appreciated.
If the operating costs are fully supported.
By HMS, and also what we know to be the contributions already, or what would be other contributions. For instance, it would be that Hillsborough County would have to, I mean, you just model what that looks like, but Hillsborough County would have to, in terms of capital, provide for their own ferry terminal in South County, for instance. And so how those, because that's one of the major costs. If we were to get other ferry grants, what we would be looking at.
Okay, we can include that.
Yes, thank you. I don't see any other hands up, no other comments. I do have a couple of real quick ones, and they're kind of geeky, so just bear with me for a second. I noticed in the operating expense graphs that there was an increase due to COVID-related expenses, but I haven't seen anything, I didn't see any blips as a result of the fuel increases. I mean, gas has gone up double since the beginning of January 21. So, I mean, that's and I don't think there's any respite in the long term for that, given the current structure of everything. So I don't see that embedded, or is it that small that the impact isn't going to be felt? That's just a question. I don't expect you to answer that question. I think that's something, when you turn this over to our staff, that's the kind of gyrations that we're going to get to play with and what ifs. The other thing, the other question I have is, in the model, what type of a relationship is there between, if a dollar of capital is spent, how many dollars of operating funds are going to come along with that? 81 cents, or what's the relationship?
Depends on how many years you're looking at. So if you're looking at a 30-year cash flow, I can show you what that breakdown is for your major fixed Guideway projects. You're looking for fixed Guideway comparisons?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can bring that to the April board meeting.
Okay, that'd be good, because that way we know, if we're looking at, 1 billion, 2 billion, what's going to happen? We can do one of these types of a thumbnail sketch as to what's going to happen. And I know staff is going to need that as we move forward. So, I know you're not here to answer our what ifs. That's going to be when you turn it over to staff, and staff gets to sit down and play with it. Very good presentation. Thank you. This is something that we've needed desperately for quite some time. I see no further. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. LeGrand.
Yes, Chair Schisler, I just wanted to state that, at the end of this process, this model will allow the board to make decisions on priorities. Whereas right now, we do have this big gray bucket, as it was shown in the presentation, of unfunded TDP projects, and then we do have what we're calling funded, and we put those in quotes because we're not really 100% sure what funded means, because we don't have the funds for those. But nonetheless, they're listed as funded. But they're all there pretty much on the same level. They're not prioritized. So this, piggybacking on your last comment, will allow you as a board to look at these and do that analysis and determine the capital to the operating, what's the biggest bang for the buck, and develop a methodology on how to prioritize the projects that will have, the greatest impact to the community, but the lower impact on our economic situation. So I would say the fun stuff is yet to come, but we will have a tool to allow us to make some great decisions.
Point taken. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 5D, we have the External Audit Services Procurement. Kathy Zickfus, I'm sorry, I apologize if I butchered that. Director of Procurement and Contracts will present the External Audit Services Procurement.
Good morning, committee chair, committee members, and Ms. LeGrand. And you did very good with my name. Again, I'm Kathy Zickfus, Director of Purchasing and Contracts. For the record, and the following slides, we're going to cover the external auditor services and the requirements of how the purchasing process must be conducted in accordance with Florida Statute 218.39. A little background, that Hart currently holds a contract with Cherry Beckert. It's a 5-year contract that expires on June 2022. And a solicitation is required to secure an auditor for the next 5 years. The solicitation is a responsibility of the Hart Board. However, Hart Procurement can perform an administrative responsibilities and conduct the solicitation if so desired. The governing body must establish an auditor selection committee appointed by Hart Board Chair. The selection committee must consist of a minimum of 3 members. One of the members of the selection committee must be a member of the governing body of an entity who will serve as the chair of the committee. A Hart employee, a chief executive officer, or the chief financial officer may not serve as a member on the auditor selection committee. However, they may serve in an advisory capacity. The auditor selection process, the committee will establish factors to use for the evaluation of the audit services, the ability of personnel, experience, ability to furnish the required service, and such other factors as may be determined by the committee to be applicable to its particular requirements. Again, this process can be done by Hart Procurement and acting as in the administrative capacity in publicly announcing the request for proposals. The auditor selection committee will evaluate, rank, and recommend the top ranked firms as it deems to be the most highly qualified. We put together a proposed timeline. Today, the Finance and Audit Committee reviews staff's recommendations for selection of external audit services. April 2022, the board approves a resolution for external auditing services, and auditor selection committee is formed. Also in April, the selection committee establishes the evaluation criteria we talked about in the previous slide. And the solicitation is put on the street, announced for request for proposals. In May of 2022, The selection committee evaluates proposals submitted by qualified firms. Just a side note, in accordance with Florida Statute 286.011, evaluation meetings are conducted publicly. Also in May, the evaluation committee will rank and recommend in order of preference to the HART board no fewer than 3 firms deemed to be the most highly qualified. June 20th, 2022, the Finance and Audit Committee meeting. The Auditor Selection Committee provides evaluation results to the Finance and Audit Committee. On July 18th, 2022, board meeting. Board of Directors approves to conduct negotiations and award. Negotiations are not subject to sunshine, Florida Statute 119.071. The board may select a firm recommended by the Audit Committee and negotiate a contract with one of the recommended firms, or may allow a designee to conduct the negotiations on its behalf. And finally, staff recommendation that the Finance and Audit Committee review the action items. The action item to recommend to the HART Board of Directors to authorize the Audit Selection Committee to proceed with the solicitation for external auditor services at its April 4th, 2022 board meeting. I'll be glad to take any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Oberman, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. I've sat on the procurement proposal committee before, and is HART still using the tool they used to help with organizing the data and the responses from the recipients and working with the committee for rankings? I can't remember the name of the system, but it was a pretty cool system.
Yeah, Bonfire?
That's it, yep.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Okay, great. That does make it a little easier for the committee to gather all the information and put it in a selection form for ranking and process. And so, do you need a motion to recommend this to the board? Or
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay. Is that all, Commissioner?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for your presentation, but I'm sure you'll need to stay close. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the committee action items. On the agenda, next on the agenda is committee action items for review by the Joint Committee, recommended for approval by a full Board of Directors. Item 6A is for the committee to form a recommendation to the HART Board of Directors to authorize staff to proceed with solicitation for procurement of external auditor services. In your package, you have a write-up and a proposed resolution in the support of this item. Any questions? And Commissioner Oberman, it would be appropriate at this time if you wish to make your motion.
I'll make the motion on item 6A to recommend the HART Board of Directors authorize staff to proceed with the solicitation for procurement of the external audited service.
Thank you. Do you have a second?
Second.
Second by Director Williams and Johnson. Okay, let's see, just voice vote? I'm sorry, yeah. Roll call vote, Danielle.
Committee Member Hudson?
Yes.
Committee Member Johnson?
Yes.
Committee Member Kemp?
Yes.
Committee Member Knight? Committee Member Knight?
Yes, ma'am. This vote is to take it to then this is a committee meeting, is to take it to the full board, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, yeah.
Committee Member Overman?
Yes.
Committee Chair Schisler?
Yes.
Committee Member Williams?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next item is action excuse me, start over. Next action item is 6B. In your package, you can find a write-up proposed resolution to form a recommendation to the Hart Board of Directors to authorize staff to proceed with a solicitation for the procurement and installation of entrance and exit gates at the 21st Avenue facilities. Do we have any committee, do many committee members have any questions of, or comments for staff? Appearing none, is there a motion to recommend that the Hart Board of Directors authorize staff to proceed with a solicitation for the procurement and installation of entrance and exit gates at the 21st Avenue facility and advance this item to the full Hart Board of Directors at the April 4th regular board meeting?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Director Johnson, second by Commissioner Kemp, I believe, yes. Okay, Danielle, can we take a roll call vote?
Committeemember Hudson? Committeemember Johnson?
Yes.
Committeemember Kemp?
Yes.
Committeemember Knight?
Yes.
Committeemember Overman?
Yes.
Committee Chair Schisler?
Yes.
Committeemember Williams?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item is action item number C. In your package, you can find a write-up and a proposed resolution to form a recommendation to the Hart Board of Directors to authorize staff to proceed with a solicitation for the procurement of a required contract for the supply of natural gas. Do the committee members have any comments or questions for staff? Appearing to be none, is there a motion to recommend that the Hart Board of Directors authorize staff to proceed with a solicitation for the procurement of a requirements contract for the supply of natural gas and advance this item to the full Board of Directors at the April 4th, 2022 regular meeting?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Director Johnson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Director Williams. Danielle, take a roll call vote, please.
Committeemember Johnson?
Yes.
Committeemember Kemp?
Yes.
Committeemember Knight? Committeemember Knight?
Go again. Hello?
Yes, we're voting on a motion to move committee action item 6C to the full Board of Directors. How do you vote?
Yes. Yes.
Committeemember Overman?
Yes.
Committee Chair Schisler?
Yes.
Committeemember Williams?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Let me see, that was 6C. Okay, now we'll moving on to committee action item 6D. In your package, you'll find a write-up and a proposed resolution to form a recommendation to the Hart Board of Directors to authorize staff to proceed with a solicitation for procurement of a contract for cash processing, ticket vending, cash and change machine services at Hart facilities. Do the committee members have any comments or questions for staff?
I have a question.
Director Williams, yes, you're recognized.
Is this for the other process that we were utilizing for Flamingo? Or is this for something else?
Ms. LeGrand?
So this recommendation is for us to look at getting additional equipment. So Flamingo is the technology that we use, but this is like the actual vending machines and the change machines.
Got it.
So it's more of like the, I guess, hardware.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, is there a motion to recommend that the Hart?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have to-
I didn't see it jump up. Okay, Commissioner Overman, you're recognized. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I'm curious, what percentage of our revenues come in as cash rather than, vendor card or online app funding?
May I respond?
Yes, please.
So the majority of our funds come in via cash. I can get back to you with the specific percentage, but I would say it's probably over 70% is cash. I don't know if, Linda, do you have that number in your head? If you don't, that's fine. So we'll get back to you and let you know specifically what the number is, but the vast majority of our funds come via cash.
Okay, I'm really looking forward to looking at that issue, because I think one of the barriers to entry to utilizing transit is the fact that very few people carry a lot of cash on them, so they just don't know how to access the transit system if they haven't figured out where the app is or those kinds of things. So I'd really like to look at that at long term. I realize that's not part of this, but I really would like to look at our strategic ways that we could reduce the barriers to access to transit, and fare box seems to be a really low-hanging fruit opportunity to make that work. But obviously, if we're carrying cash around, we need to make sure it safely gets to where it needs to go. So I will support this item.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands, so.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Who's second? Director Williams. Okay, thank you. Danielle, voice vote, roll call vote, please.
Director Johnson?
Yes?
Committee Member Kemp?
Yes.
Committee Member Knight?
Yes.
Committee Member Overman?
Yes.
Committee Chair Schisler?
Yes.
Committee Member Williams?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, committee members. Next item is 6E. In your package, you will find a write-up and a proposed resolution to form a recommendation to the Hart Board of Directors to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to award contracts and task orders to Flores Construction Company, American Construction Services, Inc. of Tampa, and AJ General Construction Services for bus transit BTI construction in a collective not-to-exceed amount of $5 million. Do the committee members have any comments or questions for staff?
I'll just let you know that Director Marvin Knight and I have not heard a word you said, Director Sisler.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yes, absolutely. Thank
Okay,
you so much.
I apologize. This is in regards to issuing a award contract and task orders to Flores Construction Company, American Construction Services of Tampa, AJ General Construction Services for bus transit infrastructure to a collective not to exceed of $5 million. Any questions? Appearing to be none, is there a motion to recommend that the Hart Board of Directors authorize the Chief Executive Officer to award contracts and task orders to Flores Construction Company, American Construction Services of Tampa, and AJ General Construction Services for bus transit infrastructure, BTI construction, in a collective not-to-exceed amount of $5 million, and advance this item to the full Board of Directors at the April 4th, 2022 regular board meeting.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Danielle, could you take a roll call vote, please?
Committee Member Johnson?
Yes?
Committee Member Kemp?
Yes.
Committee Member Knight? Committee Member Knight? Committee Member Overman?
Yes.
Committee Chair Schisler?
Yes.
Committee Member Williams?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to committee action item 6F. In your package, you will find a write-up of the proposed resolution to form a recommendation to the Hart Board of Directors to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to award a contract to all Florida fire equipment for fleet fire suppression inspection, parts and services in a not-to-exceed amount of $161,400. Do committee members have any questions or comments for staff? Director Williams, you're recognized. Did you have your hand up?
No.
Oh,
I was
okay.
I had no question.
Okay, I'm sorry. Any comments or questions? Okay. Seeing none, is there a motion to recommend that the Hart Board of Directors authorize staff to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to award his contract to All Florida Fire Equipment for fleet fire suppression, inspection parts, and services in a not-to-exceed amount of $161,400 and advance this item to the full Board of Directors at the April 4th, 2022 regular board meeting. Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
Okay, by
Thanks.
Commissioner Camp, second. Commissioner Johnson, Director Johnson. Danielle, can we have a vote, please?
Committee Member Johnson?
Yes?
Committee Member Kemp?
Yes.
Committee Member Knight? Committee Member Overman?
I couldn't hear anything.
No, we couldn't hear anything. We're assuming you're asking for a vote on 6F?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Committee Chair Schisler?
Yes.
Committee Member Williams?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't talk any closer into the thing, so it's, okay. If we can't hear it, holler, we'll say it again. Item 6G, in your package, you find a write-up and a proposed resolution to form a recommendation to the HART Board of Directors to approve revisions to HART Procurement Manual. Do committee members have any questions or comments for staff? Do you have Director Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make sure, and Ms. LeGrand, this is the issue that came up at the board meeting, I think, a couple board meetings ago? Okay. So we're going to be moving forward on, or this will be recommending that we go to the board, the full board, to be able to fix the issue that we had with that.
Right, so if I may.
Please,
Director
please.
Schisler. If you look in the packet, I'll quickly read the overview. And this revision follows the original approval of the HART Procurement Manual on May 8th, 2012, and all board-approved revisions that have followed. The revision is to add a necessary clause of environmental and energy efficiency, giving preference to the extent practical and economically feasible for products and services that conserve natural resources, protect the environment, and are energy efficient. This clause is now required to be included in the procurement manual by the Federal Transit Administration and will satisfy an advisory comment received during the HART Financial Management Oversight Audit in December of '21. So you are correct, Director Johnson, that this was presented in December, and now we want to go on ahead and go through the process to update our manual to include this language.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page on that one. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
A second. Motion is second. Danielle, if you'll take a roll call vote, please.
Committee Member Johnson?
Yes?
Committee Member Kemp?
Yes.
Committee Member Knight?
Yes.
Committee Member Overman?
Yes.
Committee Chair Schisler?
Yes.
Committee Member Williams?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Let's moving on to item 6H. In your packet, you can find a write-up and a proposed resolution to form a recommendation to the HART Board of Directors to authorize the dissolution of the defective 401A deferred compensation benefit plan created in 2008, including payment of associated costs and authorization for staff to take all necessary actions to create a new and valid 401A deferred compensation plan. Does committee members have any comments or questions for staff?
I have a question.
I couldn't hear you, but I'm assuming we're dealing with the 401A plan?
We're dealing with the defective 401A, dissolving it and creating a new one that is valid and functional.
Okay, so my only question there is, are we going to do it the other way around? Create a new plan so new contributions can go into it and then dissolve the defective plan? Because I believe that's an important order. In order to make sure that there is a place for ongoing contributions to go while if there's an interim between when the defective one is terminated or dissolved and the new one is created.
Okay.
I think it's going to Yeah, my question is, are we doing it in the what I believe is the proper order rather than what is described here in the action item?
Okay, we have somebody to address that.
Good morning, Sylvie Berrien, Interim Director of Legal Services. Yes, that is correct. However, we will be moving forward with the dissolution, but at the same time, ensuring that the other plan is set up appropriately and correctly.
They'll be done concurrently, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Director Williams? Okay. Do we have any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to authorize? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Huh? Director Knight?
Yes.
Do you have a question?
Yes, so, after, we're gonna vote with the understanding that at the main meeting, that the language will reflect what Commissioner Overman is talking about. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We can address that, but yeah, okay, yes. We will ensure that the motion for the full board will include the correct and concurrent timing references. So the creation of the new one and the dissolution of the old one, so there's no lapse in any kind of availability.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Danielle, if you could take a roll call vote, please.
I apologize. Who seconded the motion?
I did. Tim Overman.
Thank you. Committee Member Johnson?
Yes.
Committee Member Kemp?
Yes.
Committee Member Knight?
Yes.
Committee Member Overman?
Yes.
Committee Chair Schisler?
Yes.
Committee Member Williams?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think this might be the last one. Okay, last but not least, item 6I. In your package, you can find a write-up and a proposed resolution to form a recommendation to the Hart Board of Directors to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to execute tasks 4 and 6 of the contract with Benesch, formerly Tinsdale Oliver, for the Tampa Arterial Bus Rapid Transit BRT study to pursue the low-cost alternative improvements to the southern portion of the corridor. Do committee members have any questions or comments for staff? Appearing to be none.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to
Second.
approve and a second. Did you get those, Danielle?
Committee Member Johnson?
Yes.
Committee Member Kemp?
Yes.
Committee Member Knight?
Can we get, Mr. Taylor, repeat it? We couldn't hear.
Okay, there's a motion to recommend to the board, recommend that the Hart Board of Directors authorize the Chief Executive Officer to execute tasks 4 and 6 of the contract with Benesch, formerly Tinsdale Oliver, for the Tampa Arterial Bus Rapid Transit, the BRT study, to pursue the low-cost alternative improvements in the southern portion of the corridor, and then advance this item to the full Board of Directors on the April 4th, 2022 regular board meeting. That is, we have a second, we have a motion and a second. And you're asking for your vote?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Committee Member Overman?
Yes.
Committee Chair Schisler?
Yes.
Committee Member Williams?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I'm sorry, hold on. Director Johnson, I apologize, I did not.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I just wanted to bring up a couple of items that I would hope that we could discuss at the next meeting.
Please.
And one of them being what our timeline is looking like for in-person meetings. I think after, all of some of the audio stuff that we've been dealing with today, it'd be kind of interesting to see where we're at on that. We're bringing everybody back in, didn't know where we're at on that. The second one being, now that we're done with the legislative session and the budget is out, I know that we're still awaiting budget vetoes as far as how some of the language would be looked at, but there was a section in the budget regarding how the surtax dollars could possibly be used at some point. I would like to be able to get an idea of how that would look for us if we decide that we are going to be having conversations with that. I think it would be a very good opportunity for our contract team to be able to come in and discuss what some strategies would be for us to be able to move forward and making sure that we're going to be getting as many dollars out of that as possible. That's all I've got, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Staff got that list? Okay, good. Yeah, I had heard about the Department of Revenue saying that we could possibly maybe get the money back if the judge agrees with it, but I didn't want to bring that up until we had something firmer from the legal aspect of it. But that's a point noted. Thank you. Any other new business? Ms. Mandel, anything?
The only point I wanted to make on that is, on the surtax question, is David Smith has been handling that litigation on our side, and I'll make sure that if we want to have a conversation about it, that he's available to discuss whatever he can on the record, given that it's pending litigation.
That's a good idea. Thank you very much. Yes.
And timeline-wise, and I just wasn't sure, I can't remember when the decision was supposed to be, but I thought it was supposed to be relatively soon, as far as what was going to be given out. I just wanted to make sure we were going to be able to, if this is going to be something that we're going to need to talk to our friends in Tallahassee
Yes.
about, I want to make sure that we are ready to go
Yes.
at day one.
You got it, and I know that has probably taken longer than anybody anticipated, but this entire case has taken longer than anybody anticipated, so.
Yeah, soon as
Let me offer to you that the legislature, the plan has to be submitted by September 1. So, assuming the judge rules, and then whatever the terms the judge rules, it's my understanding that then a plan is submitted for, to Department of Revenue for distribution back to Hillsborough County as a whole. So there is a window where I would imagine Hart would have an opportunity to submit its ideas to a plan. So thank you for bringing that up, because I think it would be wise to have one, seeing as that one's being, floated at the moment at the county level. So I think it's a good idea to have those conversations moving forward. So.
Good discussion. Soon as a relative comment. Anyway, okay, thank you very much. I believe this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Keep your bottle of water from all that.